Alright, so today I'm going to show you guys how to change brake pads front and rear along with the rotors on a Buick Enclave. This particular model is going to be a 2011 Enclave. So tools you're going to need are going to be listed right here. Tools you're going to need for the job is going to be an impact wrench is optional, a breaker bar, a C-Clamp, 3/4 inch drive ratchet, a 3-inch half drive extension, half drive ratchet, a hammer, pair of needle nose pliers, a large screwdriver, flat or Phillip, it doesn't matter, a T20 Torx bit, a 13mm 3/4 inch drive socket, a 22mm half-inch socket, and a 23mm or 21mm, sorry, half-inch socket. Now, first step we're going to want to do, I'm going to go ahead and work on the front right here. So we're going to do the two front pads and rotors. So let's go ahead and find a safe jacking point with our jack right here and jack up both front wheels along with putting jack stands on it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right quick. Okay, now that the vehicle is securely in the air with a jack and two jack stands, the wheels are chalked off, and we have given the vehicle a shake to make sure everything is stable. We can go ahead and go on with removing the wheel. Now, the wheels are going to be a 22mm lug, 22mm lug nuts. But if you guys have like these covers over it and they break just like how these are broken, you're going to want to go ahead and use a 21mm in order to get those off, so that one fits on there better. These little covers add a extra millimeter, so any car that you guys are ever working on, if it's a say for example it's a 21mm lug nut and it breaks off, it's going to be a 20mm. So keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and remove this wheel. I'm going to go ahead and hook this up to my my air tool. Let me go ahead and remove it. Alright, so now that we got my air tool hooked up, we can go ahead and go on with removing the wheel. There's one. That's two. 3. 4, and then we're going to have to switch to 21mm for those are the two. That's 5. And that's 6. Let's go ahead and pull this wheel off. This one can come off. There we go. Let's go ahead and pull this wheel off. Now that the wheel's off, I go ahead and I thread back in the lug nuts so I don't lose them. The other side is going to be the same exact procedure. We already took the wheel off on that side, threaded the lug nuts back in. Same exact procedure. So now what we're going to want to go ahead and do is we're going to want to go ahead and start with removing the caliper. Alright, so to remove the caliper bracket, we're going to use a 13mm. Go ahead and break that loose. And then break the bottom one loose. There we go. So now that we have those two loose, we can go ahead and remove those bolts. There's one. And here's going to be the other one. So we got those two bolts removed, and we're going to go ahead and separate the caliper from the pads right here. And one step you want to do before you remove this, actually, sorry I forgot to mention it, you're going to want to have something that can hold up this caliper because you do not want to have it hanging by the hose. So I usually have an S hook for it, but I lost the hook. So right now I'm just going to use a piece of wire. So now that the caliper, you can see it's separated. You might have to take a pry bar in here and pry it out. Sometimes it's separated easily. Depends on how you do it beforehand. Let me go ahead and tie this up and let me get back to the video. So now that it's held up there, you're going to want to go ahead and remove the pads. I already removed one, as you can see here. Remove that one, remove the rear one. Sometimes they get stuck in there. You might have to take a pry bar and pry it out. Most of the time they can just pull out. This one looks like I might have to take a pry bar and pull this one out. Okay, now we're going to use 21mm to remove the two caliper bracket bolts right here and right here. 21 millimeter. I already broke them loose, already took them out. Go ahead, thread these bolts out. There's one. And you're going to hold the sprocket because it may fall. There's two. And there's the bracket. So bracket's out. Last thing left to do, take this rotor out. So let me go get the Torx bit for it. I'm going to use a T30 bit to take it off. As you can see, it's already off. T30 fits perfectly inside of there. I used a 3-inch extension on a 1/2-inch drive to take it off. A little tip, you're going to want to take a big screwdriver and push it in there. Have one person hold the screwdriver, or you can do it yourself, and have one person spin that bolt. Otherwise this whole rotor is going to keep spinning with it. Do not use an impact on there, and if you strip the bolt, you're going to have to drill it out. Most of the times I don't really reinstall this bolt after I take it off. The bolt is just there to hold the rotor in place when you're putting it on the caliper. So now that that's off, we can go ahead and take this rotor off. Let me show you a trick on how to take this rotor off. So the trick that I usually do isn't going to work on this one because I don't have a bolt long enough. But what you do is you get a bolt that threads in here and get a head. This is going to be a 13 millimeter right here. Get a socket to fit the head and just keep tightening it. And that's going to pull this caliper away from the mounting point when you keep tightening it. So that's a really easy trick to get it off if you have a bolt that can fit it, but I don't, so unfortunately I gotta beat this off. So let me go ahead and beat this off. So now that the rotor is off, I'm gonna go do the same thing to the other side. Alright, now I just went and I bought the rotor, and I bought the brakes both for the rear and for the front. So now that we're at this point, we're gonna wanna go ahead and put that rotor on. So I'm gonna go ahead, unpack your set, put that on. Okay, now the rotor's on. Tip, if you're putting the screw back in, you want to make sure you line up that hole. As you can see, the hole right there, it's lined up. So if you are putting the screw back in, you're going to want to line up that hole. After that rotor's on, you're going to take some brake cleaner and you're going to spray down this rotor to get all that shipping grease off of it. Go ahead and give it a good spray, front, inside, and you want to go ahead and do the back also while you're at it. Just give it a good spray down. Now, you're going to want to pop the hood because we're going to have to compress this caliper. So, go ahead, pull the hood release. Go ahead and open up that hood. And that .3 reservoir, going to go ahead, remove that cap, pull that off, set the cap right here. You won't lose it. Set it on top of the engine bay. You're going to remember it's on top of the engine bay. Make sure the brake fluid is not too high up so we can compress. So right now brake fluid looks good. Let's go ahead and compress that. Now, you never want to compress on the new brake pad, but I kind of forgot that I had to compress the caliper and I already returned the brake pad, so we're going to go ahead and do it on the new one. So what you're going to do is put the brake pad in. You see the pistons, those pistons are going to want to go together. So you're going to put the brake pad in and put a C-clamp on it, and then just keep turning the C-clamp so it'll compress it down. Now you can see it's compressed down, and you're going to want to go ahead and check your brake fluid. Make sure it's good, make sure it's not all the way up here. It's still good, it's not overflowing. So that's done compressing. Now we can go ahead and put on the caliper bracket, which is this part. Now a little tip when putting back on parts so it'll come off easier next time. Just take a little bit of anti-seize compound, a little bit, and put it on these bolts. You can already see that there was anti-seize on these bolts before. Just put a little bit on here. Now that the bracket's back on, the rotor is pretty much almost held in place. You can go ahead and put the screw back in if you want to. I'm not going to use this screw. I don't like them. They always strip out. They're always a pain in the ass to get out. I'm not going to use that screw. So next step we're going to want to do is go ahead and put the brake pads in. So let me go ahead and get my brake grease and I'll come back here. Okay, now I went ahead and put on the brake pads. They just slide in. I didn't put this one in all the way yet, so basically I put the back one in already. It's the same exact procedure. The back one on the driver's side, the wear tab is going to be facing on the top right here. So that's the driver's side, the wear tab is going to be facing on the top. You just stick the pad in the grooves and just go ahead and slide them in just like so on both sides, and the pads go in. Make sure you put brake grease, if you have brake grease, on the mount right here on the inside. on the slide so it'll slide in easier. And then after that's done, we can go ahead and put back on this caliper. I'm going to go ahead and position the caliper and put one bolt in and show you the rest. Okay, now that the caliper's back in, I went ahead and tightened the two 13mm bolts. Caliper's in, rotors in, and brake pads are in. We can go ahead and remove this wire that we were using to hold up our caliper. That can go ahead and come off. So that wire's off. The last step you're going to want to do is just take some brake cleaner one more time and then just clean the whole area, caliper and everything. And that's it. Put back on the tire and you're done with this side. Same exact procedure on the other side for the front. Let's go ahead and move to the rear. Now, one thing before we move to the rear, just so your brake fluid doesn't overflow, you're going to want to go ahead and put your cap back on. And when you have both wheels on, both calipers on, both brake pads in, we want to go ahead and start up the car with the brake cap back on, start up the car, and then just pump the brake pedals a few times. And I think I ran this car out of fuel, but not a big deal. So the brake pedal got pumped a few times so the brake fluid went down. Now once the brake pedal went down, make sure the car is still jacked up and just spin the wheel to make sure you don't hear any brake noise or anything. Make sure everything is good. Do that to both wheels. And both wheels sound good. So we're ready to jack up the car a little bit more. And drop these jack stands. That's one. That's two. Go ahead and lower the car easy. And now the car is on the ground. Pull the jack out. Set our torque wrench to 100 foot-pounds of torque. And torque each lug nut in a star pattern. Okay, now that the vehicle is jacked up and we've shaken it and seen that it's secured on two jack stands, we're going to go ahead and take a 22mm once again and remove the tires. My impact has died on me, so I got to go manual route. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this tire and I will get back to y'all. Now the only difference with the rear one is going to be, we're going to be using a 14mm socket to take off the bracket bolt. If I can fit it in there, there we go. The socket is going to be a 14mm. So I'm going to go ahead and take off this bracket bolt. So for these rear ones, since they're not as heavy, I just kind of leave the caliper hanging there. And then the brake pads, we're going to go ahead and take those off next. As you know, they just slide off. Both of them just slide off. Keep note, we feel it, the slide pin is going to be on the bottom for the driver rear. Slide pin is on the bottom. On the back on the bottom, so keep note of that. Let's go ahead and take off the bolts holding that in. That's going to be a 21mm in the back, I believe. Yes, 21mm. Let's go ahead and take those off. Now that the mountain bracket is off, right there, we can go ahead and remove the T30 Torx screw. I've already ran ahead and broke it loose. The good thing about the rear one is they're not really going to spin that much because they're kind of locked in. So if you don't have a screwdriver that can fit in there, it'll come off. Or you can leave the mountain bracket on. I'll show you on the other side how you can leave the mountain bracket on. And where's my screwdriver? Let me show you on the other side of the car. If you leave the mountain bracket on, you can stick something in here to wedge. When it spins up, it'll get wedged against here. Or you can jab something in here and pry it and hold it. So that's how you can do it with the mountain bracket on. So let me go ahead and beat the rotor off the other side and we'll go from there. Now I got the rotor off. I already went ahead and compressed my caliper. You guys already showed you guys how to compress the caliper, so it's the same exact procedure. Put the brake pad in there, use the C-Clamp, compress it down, make sure it's flush. Let's go ahead and put the rotor on here. While you're at it, you can go ahead, this is your parking brake right here, these are your parking brake shoes. You can go ahead and inspect these, make sure they're good. If you want to replace them, you can go ahead and replace them while you have them off. I don't really use the parking brake in my car, so I don't really mind if it doesn't work, so I'm not even going to inspect those. If you can see how these are really dirty, you can, while you have this off, and this is the parking brake too, go ahead and just take some brake cleaner and just clean everything down in here. Make it a little bit quieter, get all the dust and grime everywhere off of here. So you can go ahead and do that on both sides. So let me go ahead and put my rotor in there, and then after I put the rotor in there, I'm going to go ahead and put the caliper bracket in there with the rotor. Again, make sure you line up the screw if you want to put the screw back in. I don't really put the screw back, I never put the screw back in, so I'm not going to line it up, I don't really care. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the mounting bracket in there, and then I'll resume when I'm putting the brake pads in. Alright, so now that the rotor's in, caliper bracket's in, I'll put one bolt on the caliper just to hold the caliper in place. I already put the rear brake pad in on the caliper right there. So remember, as I said, the slide pin on the rear one is going to be on the bottom. So the slide pin is going to be on the bottom for the rear one, on the driver's side. And then we can go ahead and put this pad back in on this side, tighten up this caliper, and put the tire on, and that's pretty much it. So let me cut back when I have this brake pad in and have this caliper tightened. Okay, so now that the caliper is back on, all we got to do is put the tire on, tighten down the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds of torque, go ahead, cover back up the brake reservoir, the hood's done, we're all done under the hood. You're going to want to start it, press the brake pedal, and then after you get pressure back in there, you're going to spin the wheel, make sure you don't hear any noise, and then you're going to want to take it for a test drive. Before you take it for a test drive, in the driveway, you're going to want to slam on the brakes a few times to make sure everything is holding correctly in the driveway. So go ahead and do that. I obviously can't take it for a test drive because I kind of ran out of gas in the driveway, so I got to go and get gas. But that's pretty much it. That's how you change brake pads on a Buick Enclave. If you have any questions, please feel free in the comments to let me know. Thank you.